Today's video is about bullet mass versus bullet velocity. But before we get into that, there seems to be an awful lot of confusion out there just based on the messages that I receive and some of the things that I see on television and elsewhere about guns and cartridges and bullets generally. So if you bear with me, I think you'll find this a very interesting video. And for viewers in foreign countries where maybe you don't have access to all of the freedoms and ammunition and guns that we do have access to, this might be particularly interesting. But I'll start out with something really rudimentary for people over here, and that is, what is a cartridge? And this is a cartridge. So we've got a brass case and we've got a bullet. And you might start laughing, but apparently it's not self-evident to a lot of people, especially in the media. This is a casing and this is a bullet. So when you hear on the news, and I've heard this several times, and people report all kinds of things to me, there's some kind of crime scene and the reporter says the road was littered with bullets. Well, that would mean littered with these, but the road can't be littered with these, because bullets are what exit the muzzle. So what the reporter means is the road was littered with shell casings or cartridge casings. So these are brass. For a shotgun, they would look different, and we can look at that another time. But I thought right off the bat I should point that out. And this little thing here is the primer. That's what's ignited by the firing pin. So these fly out in great numbers depending on what firearm you're using. And in battlegrounds, there will be millions of these brass casings of different sizes. This is a 300 blackout cartridge case. That's a 300 blackout cartridge. So the case with the bullet is a cartridge. And for the media people, this is the bullet. That's what flies through the air. And that's what the rifling works on. And this is full of powder. Before you fire it and after you fire it, there's a dent in the primer pocket and the powder is gone, and this case is ejected onto the road or into the field or wherever. So I thought I'd get that out of the way, and now we can shift to the other thing that I've received so many messages and comments about, and emails and other things, and I'm happy to talk about this because it probably should be clarified. So there's kind of a conflict, like over centuries, that's really unsolvable, but you could see what makes sense for you, for hunting and for warfare. And the first thing I'll start out with is military cartridges, and we'll start out here on this side. So this is the 8mm Mauser. It's a big round, and next to it is the 7.92 by 33 Kurtz, which is, a lot of people call it the 8mm Kurtz. And maybe some of you read Heart of Darkness, and there's a character in that book named Walter Kurtz, and that just means Walter short. Kurtz means short in German, if I'm not wrong. Anyway, the 8mm Mauser is a massive cartridge, the Kurtz not so much so. This is the Russian 7.62 by 54R, the R meaning rim. This is the 7.62 by 39. If you don't recognize the numbers, that's a very common cartridge, because until they shifted to a 22 caliber bullet in the AK, this is the round. And most AKs that you run across are still 7.62 by 39. And in case you don't know, the 7.62 figure is a measurement of the bore diameter, and the 54 is the length of brass case in millimeters. So it tells you a lot. 7.62 bullet diameter by 54 brass cartridge case length, R rimmed. This is 7.62, so same bullet diameter as the bigger cartridge, by 39, and no R. That means it's rimless. This is the grade 30-06 Springfield 223 or 5.56. This is the original replacement, I believe, for the 45-70 and the 30-40 Krag. Then the 30-06 Then the 5.56, which is known as 223 Remington, just because Remington commercialized this round. And ARs use this cartridge. And all of the things that you hear on the news, some of them not very good, use this cartridge. And this is a bullet. This is actually a 60 grain nozzler, so it's a little bit heavier than what a lot of people would use. If you just go to the store and buy ammo for an AR, it's usually 55 grains or 50 grains. Depends what they pull off the shelf. It's a pretty small bullet. This is a 308 or 7.62 NATO. There was some kind of a discussion between the United States and NATO countries about which cartridge to adopt. NATO went with the heavier round. This 7.62 NATO or 308 Winchester, because Winchester commercialized it, just as Remington commercialized the 5.56 and called it 223 Remington. Same for this cartridge, so 308 Winchester. It's about the same power as the 30-06, but you can see by using a more intense powder, actually a ball powder where the shape of the powder was in a ball shape, small grains of powder in ball shape, it allows you greater density, higher pressures. So this case is bigger, this case is smaller, but the 308 has about the same performance. You lose about 100 feet per second depending on bullet weight in the 308. But for practical purposes, they're almost the same, but you can see how much shorter the 308 is from the 30-06. This allows you to make a more compact firearm, smaller action and so forth. I have this on the table, it's one of my favorite rounds. I used it a lot when I was younger. It's 35 Remington, and here's another 223. I put them next to one another because I know a lot of young guys that use 223s for deer hunting where it's legal, or they use the 22-250, and some people use a 220 Swift, which I don't have on the table. And now we're reaching the main meaning of the video, and that is that everybody knows that kinetic energy is the measurement of an object in movement. So mass and velocity cause different changes to kinetic energy. So a small bullet moving very quickly can have as much energy as a large bullet moving slowly. And I think if you remember that equation, if you double the mass of a bullet, you get double the energy. But if you double the velocity, you get 4 times the energy. So on paper that can look quite attractive. And my favorite, you've probably had this at university or someplace else, my favorite is the thing the physics people pull out, and that's a ping pong ball. So the ping pong ball can be accelerated to dramatic speeds, and when you move something at a dramatic speed, the trajectory is impressive. Now gravity works on all things at the same time and in the same way, but because the ping pong ball will be traveling quicker, it'll get further before it hits the ground. The problem is that even if we accelerate the ping pong ball at very high velocity, as we can in terms of a bullet in the 22-250 or 220 Swift or 223, we get the velocity, we may get some kind of energy, but transferring the energy from the bullet to the target means we have to have a bullet of certain strength. And one of the problems with velocity is, as you increase the velocity, things come undone. The molecules fail more easily. So, to put it simply, the ping pong ball may be traveling at 5,000 feet per second, but when it hits the target, the target may be affected very little, if at all, but the ping pong ball will fail. It'll turn potentially to just a flattened form, or maybe fragment. I don't know, I'm making that up. But that's the ping pong ball. Now over here I have the golf ball, and a golf ball traveling at any speed well, nobody wants to have somebody else throw a golf ball at them. And you can see it traveling in the air because the golf ball has mass. The energy figures, well, it depends how fast you're throwing the golf ball. But with mass, you have a dramatic effect on the target. And that's something they teach you, and I just thought I'd review that for younger viewers that are deciding whether they should take a 223 for deer or a 5.56 or a 223. And the 35 Remington is a perfect example. This fires a 200 grain bullet of reasonable, or even let's say positive mass, so it's a little heavier than the average bullet. The 223 is a very light bullet. You can get away with light bullets, and there are guys running around the woods I know with 220 Swifts, and they're telling me that they use nozzler bullets because they hold together, because they know the 223 can come undone unless you use steel case bullets. If you use steel case bullets, that's what the military mandates. I think it's the Geneva Convention, but I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. Steel bullets will just pass right through. And the concept with that agreement was that if bullets tumble or if bullets mushroom, the battlefield wounds are just ghastly and they're hard to repair, like surgeons have trouble with it, and it's just inhuman. So supposedly everybody agreed to use steel case bullets, so full metal jacket, but they just make a pencil hole right through whatever you hit. Anyway, getting back to the conflict between mass and velocity. This has been a subject for a long time, and I think that generally speaking, you should fault on the side of mass. You can get a high-speed, small projectile to perform, but I view it as kind of a trick. You can make it work, but if you hit a twig or if you hit something, it may stay point on, but it may also fragment. Strange things happen with high velocity, and I think most people realize this. You're better off with the bigger bullet. And actually, whenever I'm having this discussion with somebody, I usually bring up African hunting, which is why I have these Kynoch rounds. So if you really believed that velocity was the answer, then I guess theoretically people could go elephant hunting with some super 22-250 or something with even higher velocity than that, but nobody does that. The British realized early that you can play games with velocity so that you get flat trajectory, but your best bet when you're talking about a dangerous game is a massive projectile. Now this bullet goes back to here, from here to here. This is actually a 50 caliber bullet. This is not the bullet that fits in here. This is different. Here's a 404. I told you about this, or maybe it was on Patreon, but I can't remember. This is my favorite African cartridge, and that's a massive bullet. So when the cards are down, the discussion usually stops, and people realize there are only so many things you can do with a bullet that weighs this little. And just getting back to the Russians, that's the AK round. This is the US round. The AK bullet is massive compared to the AR round. And we're seeing a lot of experimental cartridges in the US where the bullet is heavier and stronger, and it's easier to make a heavier bullet stronger. But that's a whole nother discussion. There's 6.5 Grendel. The 300 Blackout actually works in ARs. There are all kinds of variations of cartridges. There's another discussion. Anyway, and then to bring the point home, actually I heard this from a friend of mine. He said a heavyweight boxer is a lot like these cartridges with big bullets. You have a massive opponent. And I think it's safe to say that no matter how quick a lighter opponent is, if you have energy and mass like a heavyweight boxer, I don't think there's anything that defeats that. And we were talking about the 30-06 the other day. That reminded me of a story I read, which you probably know, about the U.S. military. So they said, we We need something still bigger. We need more power. We need more mass. And this goes back to turn of the century. And so John Browning developed this, which is 50 Browning machine gun. And now you have everything. You have velocity and you have mass. And you don't have to worry about really anything except the size of the weapon and the recoil that's generated. And that's kind of an interesting picture, I think. There's the 30-06. Here's the AR round and the Browning. And of course I think the Browning will solve any problem. And there are a lot of single shots, and Barrett has made a big booming business out of sniper rifles in the Browning round. But you can see the scale of things. I mean, this look at this bullet, and yet we all know what kind of damage it can do. I didn't talk about this round. I should have. That's the 6.5 Japanese. So we kind of reviewed the different military cartridges. I should have had a 7.5 Swiss on the table. Hopefully we were able to film some of these rounds. I put a 22 long rifle here because some people write me and I miss things just because of the way my videos are. That's a 22 long rifle. That's a 6mm German round. It's like for a Zimmer Stutzen, which I hope I'm saying that right. Like for Zimmer is a room, so for shooting in the room, like a parlor gun. I had some of those. They're fun. Then on the table, I just put a 223 Tikka T3, and then here I put a Ruger 77 in 35 Whelen, and the 35 Whelen shoots the same caliber. This is 35 Remington, so the Whelen is this cartridge, the 30-06, necked up to hold this larger 35 caliber bullet. This bullet is 7.62 or 30, and this is 35 Remington. And the 35 Whelen is one of those unsung heroes, just a fantastic cartridge. I've had nothing but success with it, mainly because if you have a reasonable velocity and a bullet of sufficient mass, you will accomplish your objective. And the 223 Tikka is fun to shoot. It's confidence building on the range because these little cartridges don't generate much recoil. And you think, well, I should use a 223 or a 22-250 or 220 Swift or whatever for deer, or I know people running around after elk with these tiny cartridges. But if something fails and you get it wrong, the animal runs away and is wounded and suffers and dies, and that's not the idea. And you probably may know this, but when the 22 high power came out in the Savage, people were running, this is going back in time, to India and going after tiger, but that wasn't the right thing to do either. Velocity is spectacular. These things that people like to watch, melons coming undone and eggs flying apart and so forth, that's a function of the energy being transferred from the bullet to the watermelon or whatever it is you're watching. But that's quite deceiving. There are so many more things that are required of a bullet, and the further away the target is, the less energy the bullet has. So you put all these factors together, and you're best off with a bullet of reasonable mass. And probably the 5.56 or 223 will eventually be replaced by something with greater bullet mass. Anyhow, oh yeah, I have this box of impressive 50 caliber rounds. I just put I mean, if that doesn't solve problems, I don't know what does. But I hope I didn't confuse you. If you have any comments, or I'm always leaving things out because I do this one take system. But this was definitely a video I had to make because so many different misunderstandings about cartridges and cases and velocity. And velocity is fine. Velocity is not that hard to achieve. Just increase the powder, increase the pressure, and you'll get velocity. That'll give you a flatter trajectory, but that doesn't mean everything. I always encourage young people, get a reasonable rifle with reasonable velocity, and I'm saying like over 2,000 feet per second, and then any bullet, 150, 180, somewhere in there. But these things that people running around with 223, it can work. It's worked thousands of times, but that doesn't mean that's what we should be doing. So anyway, I hope I covered the ground that I should have covered, and thanks for your patience with this video. Hope it wasn't too disorganized, and I hope my props weren't too stupid, the ping pong ball and the golf ball, but they make a point. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe and join me on Patreon. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next video.